Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Carrie Lukas, and I'm president of Independent Women's Forum. Independent Women's Forum is the leading national women's organization dedicated to developing and advancing policies that aren't just well-intended, but actually enhance people's freedoms, opportunities, and well-being. We have an amazing staff of women, some of the sharpest policy, communications, and legal minds in the country. We testify before Congress and state legislatures, produce educational materials, and publish articles about various policy issues. We file amicus brief in various court cases and frequently interface with the media to make the case for better public policy. We also make a point to champion women from across the country, celebrating their accomplishments and lives. If you haven't read our Champion Profile series, I hope you will check them out on IWF.org under the About tab. We release a new profile every 2 weeks. Please check out our website for more information. A lot of new daily content is at IWF.org. I also hope you'll sign up to become an email subscriber and even a mobile insider for special text alerts so you can get the latest news, updates, and events from IWF. And today, I'm tremendously honored to be joined by Congressman Jackie Walorski from Indiana's 2nd Congressional District. Today, we're going to talk about childcare and paid leave, two critical issues in our COVID-19 world. In particular, I'm really excited to talk to the Congresswoman about new legislation that she introduced to make lives a little easier for working families. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining me here today to have this conversation.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor. I am very, very grateful. So look forward to chatting with you today.
Well, yeah, I feel like this is such a timely and important conversation. We've been hearing so much about childcare and paid leave, and really this conversation about this being part of our infrastructure. And I know that's something you and I agree about. This is, incredibly important for our economies and families. But I feel like the conversation's gone off a little on the rails, and so much of the conversation seems to think that government and a lot of spending is the only way to approach them. What do you think about this?
Well, childcare and paid time leave are bipartisan issues. They always have been. Working parents shouldn't have to choose between their financial security and keeping their family strong. But to your comment about going off the rails, it has. In the past, both parties have worked together to increase funding on both sides, to expand access to childcare, and also to fund paid time off. Republicans want to work with the Democrats, we always have, to find the right way to help Americans better balance work and family. So I would tell you this gets us back on the guardrails. If President Biden and the Democrats really do want to pursue bipartisan solutions, this is the best place to start, because there's no disagreement about the need. And I think we can come to a solution that actually works for the whole country. If they want to do that, they've not yet, but we're hoping that they will.
Yeah, that's really, and I feel like you have a great new bill that's come out, the Working Families Child Care Access Act. Can you tell me a little bit about your approach?
Yeah, absolutely. So I introduced the Working Families Child Access Act, which would give working parents more flexibility to save money for childcare and related expenses. So many working families have access to a FSA account to help pay for childcare. Most people have FSA accounts. However, about 1% of taxpayers actually take advantage of these tax advantage ways to save money. So that's because families can only contribute $5,000 a year, not nearly enough to cover the average cost of childcare. So the funds can only be used for a narrow set of expenses, and any funds that are not used are forfeited. So my bill would improve access to this program by increasing the contribution limits to $15,000, allowing those funds to roll over at the end of the year so they don't lose them, and expanding those expenses. So if you triple the amount of the contribution to $15,000, if you eliminate the horrible use it or lose it rule, which a lot of people can't, and allow this to flow into the following year without penalty, gives more people and more parents flexibility to use those FSA funds for adoption, for tutoring, for sports activities, for art and music, anything that affects that child's quality of life. It also raises that dependent age from 13 to 15.
That's I love this idea. I think it's so important to because in part it recognizes that it's about empowering families and individuals to recognize that to use their money how they see fit and make childcare and care decisions for their kids that makes them them. And I feel like one of the problems in the conversation about childcare is so often there's this idea that government just needs to build these big or invest, give money to kind of specific childcare centers modeled after our public schools. But real parents out there have very different needs when it comes to childcare or caring for their kids or what they want. So I think this really preserves, choice for parents. Is that part of what motivates you, is to let people figure out what they want?
Yeah, I thought we learned a long time ago in this country, Carrie, that one size fits all from Washington does not filter into every part of this country and apply the same. It's not. Families are different. Everybody has different makeup in their families, their kids, their parents. And, I think one of the things that blows my mind, and I think it's important to think about this stat, childcare discretionary funding has doubled from $2.8 billion in FY 2016 to $5.8 billion in fiscal year 2020. I supported $14 billion in emergency childcare funding at the beginning of the pandemic. And it was a smart investment because we were talking about providing very targeted relief to working families. But Democrats decided to go it alone, and they liked this idea of just pouring billions of dollars into, a one size fits all. So, your family may not fit what the government sees as parameters. That's why it's important to make these things as flexible as possible. And when you're talking about kids, especially coming out of COVID here for the last almost year and a half, is what they've missed, what they need to be a part of. Why are these quality of life issues? And considering for the first time adoption, music, art, things that expand their mind and are so necessary for kids in this culture, but especially now, especially coming out of COVID. And we've been listening. We've listened to families for the last several years about, what's the best way we can get money to you? And what's the best way? What do you need? They don't need the government coming in and just dropping money everywhere. They need very specific targeted help. And that's what we're hoping to be able to bring them in this bill.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've written a little bit about how government has been really contributing to the childcare crisis with excessive regulations. You think about all those people out there who really would love to have a home-based daycare center, but those are pretty rare, and it makes sense because a lot of the regulations, what it would take to open such a center, can be really onerous. So I think it's time to get government out of the way. And I was recently reading that this idea of just how hard it is now for childcare workers to get staff, to hire people, because the COVID relief packages have made it really make more economic sense for people not to work and to stay home. So I think, I think it's time for government to start embracing that principle that we've used for doctors and say, first, we need to do no harm.
Yeah. Okay. Now you set me up. Now I could talk about this for an hour because this is so alive across this country. I can tell you we're one of the largest manufacturing districts in the country. We produce big things like RVs and boats and trailers, and we're like the tourist capital as far as, the things that we actually make and export out of here. But our economy has been phenomenally going extremely well coming through COVID. We were doing just fine. And, now we have our government that nobody can compete with, paying people to stay at home and stay out of the workforce. We were talking about this earlier. We lost 2 million women because of COVID out of the workforce. They're the main caregivers. They're the one that shoulder the burden of a lot of things that we just dealt with COVID in this country. To keep them out of the workforce, we have a labor shortage in this country. I can tell you the number one issue in our district, the Indiana 2nd District, we have a labor shortage. We can't hire. And if we can't hire, Carrie, we'll never be able to rebuild those global supply chains that are making all the little component pieces and computer chips for cars and RVs and wood and the things that are just literally hard to find right now. It's because we need more people in our workforce. So I can't tell you how damaging it's been. I hear from employers every day in my district, and it's not just the employers of the 5,000 unit RV companies. I hear from mom and pop stores. I hear from people with 2 employees and they lost one and they need one, and they can't even get people to come in for an interview. So we are in a real desperate spot right now, and we're going to weather our way through it, and we'll come out on the other side of it. But it's going to take the Republicans and Democrats working together to find solutions, not just doing what they're doing, which is just throwing money at people staying home. We have to stop that. We have got to go back to work, open up our states, and move forward as fast as we can, leaving COVID back in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm glad you brought up this idea of or this paid time off, this concept of what people need to get back into the workforce, because paid leave is another one where obviously, especially with COVID, we were having a really interesting national conversation about helping people who need paid time off from work. And filling in the gaps, because obviously there are some people who don't have paid time off from work and they really struggle. Everybody hates to hear the story of a woman who's just had a baby and then has to go quickly back to work. But we also needed to recognize, and I think we were having a good national conversation before COVID, about how a lot of workers do have compensation packages that they want and do have paid leave. And we need to make sure that as we find solutions, we don't kind of throw the good out with the bad. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit. Do you feel like that that there is the possibility of finding solutions that aren't kind of one size fits all that come from the federal government? Because I think there's a real danger to that. There may be a need, but we need to target that aid instead of just making it one job arrangement or one compensation arrangement for all workers.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because I've been working on this for the last couple of years. As a bipartisan plan, and we were doing really well coming into last year, 2 years ago. I thought we were almost there. We were this close, and the whole key was the federal government cannot design this and mandate it on employers. They can't. And if any time to be able to do this post-COVID is very, very dangerous. As I said, we have a labor shortage. We don't even have people in some places back to work yet to even be able to pen a solution to a paid time off. We got to get them back to work first. First, they have to work. They have to be an employee. And then we look at really the reality of this. We worked with NFIB, one of the largest in the country, organizations that covers small business in this country. They're the advocate. We worked really closely with them. And basically they said, if you're dealing with 3 or 4 people as employees, you're not going to have the same paid time off policy if you have 3,000, 30,000, or 1 million employees. Has to be different. It has to be offered with the employer in mind of how many people we're even talking about to begin with. So, we want to make sure it's not mandatory. We also want to make sure that it's something that, can be worked on across state lines maybe, or worked on with the private sector for short-term disability insurance and those kinds of things. There are solutions out there, Carrie, and I'm more optimistic today, even though we weren't able to snatch this the way we thought we were going to just a couple of years ago, now that we're post-COVID. But there's ways to do this, and it's not throwing all the money. It's not making it mandatory. It's not big government coming in. It's allowing the flexibility amongst all of our employers in this country to come together. They absolutely want to offer paid time off to their employees, and the employees absolutely want it. So we get the need, and we see that there is a solution. So I'm going to stick to it. I'm at the table right now with a large group of shareholders. We're going to work on this until we get it right. But I'll guarantee you, getting it right, it has to be bipartisan, cannot be mandatory. And we've got to find ways where, folks can get a tailored plan that actually works for them, that doesn't put everybody in the same boat.
It is interesting. I think when you think about this idea, we all know that women really value flexibility. And I've seen research that shows that the younger generation, the up-and-comers, the Gen Z, that they overwhelmingly, they also favor, men and women alike, really favor this idea of being able to tailor what employment looks for them, so that it's not everybody wants to have a traditional 9-to-5 job, and that's okay as long as people are able to work and earn. We should be trying to find ways to let people pursue the lives that they want. And I hope that government recognizes that you can't mandate flexibility. That's really an oxymoron. You have to allow the market to find out those things are going to help all workers.
That's right. And I originally, when I got into this whole concept of paid time off, I got into it based upon what you just said. These big groups of people that want more flexibility. They didn't want additional cash per hour. They wanted time off with their families, millennials. It was a very important tool to give to their employers. And now if we just look back over COVID, we've lost 2 million women in the workforce. 2 million women, because they were tending to their families and tending to everything else that was going on. Families, if you remember, were the biggest winners in the post-tax reform economy that I was involved in on Ways and Means on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Women across all races experienced larger than average wage gains in the past couple of years. Unemployment for women reached an historic low. pre-COVID at 3.2. Unemployment rates for working mothers hit a 66-year low at 3.5%. In 2018, for the first time in 10 years, the share of women in the workforce surpassed men, reaching 50.04%. So when you see these massive tax hikes that are coming around the corner, mandates from the federal government which regulate companies out of business, especially on small business, it will hurt working families by destroying their jobs and shrinking their paychecks. So that's why we're fighting as hard as we are. How do we get through all this? We get women back to work. How do we do that? We offer them flexibility. We do what we can do to keep these mandates off of them, allow them to grow, allow them to create, and allow them to keep doing what they were doing before we lost them. And that's how we're going to get our economy back, is getting our women back in the workforce.
I couldn't agree more. And I feel like this is such an important issue with so many different facets. We could go on talking for a really long time. So I hope that we can continue this conversation. And I really appreciate your time today, Congresswoman Walorski. Thank you so much for joining me. And thanks for everyone for watching. Please stay tuned for more events like this from IWF.
Thanks, Carrie. This is great. Very much appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.